Welcome to Spirits and Cousins. I'm Tish.
And I'm Courtney.
And we are very excited to have someone come back that we asked to come back. This episode today, we're going to be talking about Romania, Transylvania, Dracula, and the trip James Annitto took to discover the truth. James, first, I want to say hi before I get into everything you've done.
Hello.
So great to have you back. We're pleased to have you back. And by the way, we had a lot of listener requests after the last time we spoke with you, and we broke that into 2 interviews, and we had our highest downloads from your interview.
Well, I appreciate that.
So selfishly, there's another reason why we wanted you back.
Well, thank you for having me back on, and I'm so glad to hear that our, of course, 2-part series went very well, and hopefully this one will be the home run.
Yeah. So in our first interview with you, we covered, the background, your background, and really focused on all your studies and experiences in demonology and the influence that you've had across the board, across this whole area of demonology, and talked about your investigations and the paranormal and everything connected with that. And given the depth of your experience, I think we also had a really good lesson on the difference between demons and evil and different types of energy, and really how few truly end up being exorcisms. So while we were chatting with James, we uncovered an experience that he had that we knew all of you wanted to hear more about. And since we had so many requests to have him back on the show, we're going to be talking today about his trip to Romania, where he spent time and hosted and investigated Transylvania. A whole lot more than just that. I'm going to let him do the talking on that. Yes, Transylvania, the birthplace of Vlad the Impaler and the inspiration for Bram Stoker's Dracula. It's really exciting. I mean, God knows all the movies and books and everything on that. And you went back to where it all began and probably had to pick apart what was real and what wasn't, because that book, Dracula, truly was supposed to be a work of fiction, right? To some extent.
Yes, a large extent, but
Yeah.
but still a great book. I think that especially for a lot of early learners and especially readers of literature, Bram Stoker's Dracula has stood the test of time, and still quite read to this day after it's almost 100 years of it being written. I think that's close to what it was, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. So let me give you everyone, I say a little background on James, but your background is so deep that it's going to take me just a little bit, but it's important because you've done a lot. You're, not only a renowned demonologist, paranormal investigator, and researcher, you're also co-founder of Presidium Warriors of St. Michael with Father Bob Bailey, who's very well known. So you studied under the best. James has been in the field of paranormal investigation since 2004. Geez, 20 years. 20 years, James.
I'm old.
And you've held many other responsibilities over the last few decades, such as being ordained as a deacon in the old Catholic movement, while also being formally ordained as a minister with another Christian denomination. You're currently a student at SNHU for your psychology degree in hopes of better understanding. Now you're going to be, you just were sharing, you're going to be done and getting your diploma for that soon, right?
Yeah, I'm actually already done.
You're done.
I walk in November, but I graduated. Should hopefully have the digital copy of it very soon. But yeah, I do plan to go for my master's degree in January. I have already went through admissions through that, and I'll have next few years of stressful life.
Well, and it's important to say that this degree is at least 4 years of study. This is not like writing in and doing a 6-week program to get this degree.
Oh yeah, it's a true school,
That's right.
a real university, and definitely 4 years of love and
Yep.
sweat and tears that are going to happen.
And that doesn't happen without making sure you can pay for it. So his day job is a project manager and estimator, with a HVAC company where he's been part of the construction industry for about 10 years. He can really apply his analytical thinking even in that role because of all the work he does in his research and investigations in really seeking a means to help people when it comes to serious hauntings. You wouldn't think the two are connected, but those same skills and the ability to clearly think through cause and effect is what you do in your job every day.
Very true. And very old houses that we look into, or places that have mold and other infiltration issues. So it goes hand in hand, especially when dealing with clients.
Yeah. So James has been part of many organizations and started some of his own, such as the Dominion Ministry, a demonology lecture duo called Duo. Okay, you're going to have to. It's
Duo demonology.
Duo Demonology, and co-partner in the creation of True Evil, a short-lived podcast, short-lived, that was hosted alongside a leading criminologist. And you're now presently working with Father Bob Bailey, Roman Catholic priest with the deliverance group Presidium Warriors of St. Michael, right?
That is correct. Yes, and I love that little pun there. Short lived.
Yeah, because you're too busy. You're too busy to keep doing it. Is that why? I think that's why.
No, my compadre Laura Jacqueline, who's famously known for the Toolbox Killers case, she has a lot busier schedule than I do. But I think we did what we had to do in our
Yep.
short little series that we had. I think it was 4 or 5 episodes, and I would love to do it again with her when time kind of calms down. But
Yeah.
no, it was great. I think we interviewed some great people, talked about some great situations. Not always great, I should say, not great situations, but yeah, it was great. And she's a great friend of mine. We speak on a weekly basis, and very smart woman.
Well, I think that it's pretty evident, you have a love for all forms of the unknown, and being a part of the parapsychology group such as PPRI out of Canada and New England, and being entertained and enthralled with the possibilities of ufology and cryptozoology while simultaneously brushing alongside these circumstances.
I love the paraphrase. That's awesome. You're doing a great job. You should rewrite my bio for me because it's short and sweet. I love it.
Well, I took your information.
No, you did good though. You definitely paraphrased it, and on my website, for people that want to be bored to death reading a biography, you can go to my website. But no, I think that was Tish. That was a phenomenal introduction.
Well, the next part, there's one last part.
There's more. So
Gosh.
for
Nearly
nearly 12
12
other people
years.
being busy, he's a busy dude.
He is. For over 12 years, you've been traveling the country lecturing about the topics of paranormal and demonology. And as recently as 2022, you led a tour to Romania, exploring the geographical footprints of Dracula himself. This is pretty exciting. That's what we're going to be talking about today, everyone. You can be found on YouTube and on radio and podcast interviews, especially if you search, you'll see him on ours, and making appearances on television and wherever he's asked to. If you're interested in more information, you can always message him directly or listen to his many conversations. You can search on YouTube, you can search the podcast apps. His website is www.jamesannitto.com. So, James, welcome. First, I want to ask you, what's new and what have you been up to?
Well, busy with life. Like I said, I just graduated with my BA in psychology. I have two beautiful, handsome boys, a significant other that drives me up the wall, and my day job, and of course my night job, as I like to call it. And lately I've been working with Father Bob Bailey, co-founded Presidium Warriors of St. Michael with him. He has stepped back a little bit in that role, and he's more of our spiritual advisor now. But been doing a lot of cases with him, lecturing with him in New York and other spots that I can't think off the top of my head. But been actively busy lecturing and dealing with cases as well, while also trying to work on a potential merger in the future with another organization that I really can't speak much about right now until the details are fully filled. But keep them busy. As I always say, if you're not busy, you're dead. And I'd rather be busy every single day because it keeps me motivated. It keeps me going. When you're busy, you learn something, and that's key.
That's great. I mean, that's the great thing when you listen to your background. You're always doing something new. You're always learning. You're always pushing things forward and looking for bigger and better ways to help people.
Yeah, definitely. Helping people is why I do this. I could be, and this could sound egocentric, but I could be that person. I'm not a bad-looking guy. To my own bias here, but I could be on the television shows, plastered all over your television screens. But that was never really my hopes or dream. Being known as an academic or a knowledgeable person, of course, is something that I hope and wish that when I'm way past this physical body, that people will remember me for the things I've done. And if they didn't, at least my kids will remember me for the things that I've done for them. But
Yep.
I always try to push the envelope. I always try to do new things. I always try to work with different people, either for good or for the bad of the situation. But I feel like moving the needle is necessary because I don't want to have a stagnant life. I don't want to be depressed knowing that I haven't done anything. And I think we're put on this plane of existence for a reason, and that's to make a difference, either for good or for bad. But I want to be somebody that can be labeled as someone, regardless of throughout my humanly mistakes, being known as somebody that did something good in life.
Love it. Any current investigations you can share with us, even if you leave the names off?
I think my investigation events are at a whole. I'm doing a few events coming up. I'm not going as insane as I was in previous years because of certain things in my life, and I want to see my kids grow up and trying to focus on raising a 2-year-old and a soon-to-be 8-year-old. So it takes precedence, and of course, my career. As much as I could take all the time off in the world I want, nobody does my job, so I'd come back to nightmares. So the recent investigation that I did that I think that I would really like to talk about more so in small detail is I just did a house in South Carolina, Marion, South Carolina, called the Holiday House. It is a Victorian mansion that got turned into a funeral home and then was abandoned for almost 20 years. And I was the first individual with Mary Jo Chudley, who I brought on as my compadre, to lead an investigation there to raise funds for Raven Historical Society, who bought the property, is fixing it up. And on my birthday, we had that event. And then there's a picture on Facebook of me actually fixing one of their floors on my birthday. So, but that is an event that was great because it was a location that's never been done in that capacity. Like there was one other team that investigated beside the in-house team that runs the historical society. So we were basically the third group and the first public event at that location. And we raised them quite a bit of money, which is always key because when I do public investigations, all money and proceeds go to property or the historical society. I don't take a dime. I don't believe in that. So, it was great in that sense that we raised them money, brought eyes on the property, and that was a great investigation, which was the weekend of June 7th. So June 8th was the event. That was great. And then as far as, investigations, I'm working with clients all the time. Me and Father Bob just got back from Maryland a couple weeks ago. And then we just had a deliverance that we just did this past week. So I'm always actively busy. I'm always trying to keep my head in the game and try to do something to make a difference. But I'm always pretty busy. But as far as events, I have a few conventions coming up, which can be looked at on my social media, Facebook. There's quite a few of them. I think this weekend we have Connecticut Paracon, where me and Father Bob speak on Saturday at 1 p.m. That's in Stratford, Connecticut. And I'm looking
exciting.
forward. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that one because, there's a good amount of people, some friends, some unfamiliar faces that I like to become acquainted to, and learn from, and maybe they learn something from me. But yeah, I'm always keeping busy.
You mentioned about the place in South Carolina, the
Yes.
used to be a funeral home.
Yep.
Have you ever heard of the House of Wills in Ohio?
Yeah, I know the House of Wills.
Oh, I shouldn't have asked. See, it shows you I'm not experienced in this stuff as you all are. Well, it was also a funeral home. So
Yeah.
I just wondered if if you'd heard about it, or maybe even if you'd been there.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, it was bought by a Satanist. He's an active,
Yes.
pronounced Satanist. Yes, of course.
And Daryl Marston, who was on Ghost Hunters, wrote a book about it. And
Yeah.
it took him out of investigations for a few years because it left him feeling.
Of course. Yeah, I've heard a lot of reactions from that place. I haven't never investigated it myself. Always, of course, as a demonologist, I always want to. And it's not a challenging thing because I'm not egocentric in that sense that I want to challenge what's there. But
Right.
I do kind of fathom going to places that are quantifiable in the sense that they've been quoted demonic or evil, because a lot of these places that I've gone to, unfortunately, fortunately, nothing ever bad has happened, or
Yeah.
never anything was detected and as such. And I get the aspect of it, why people do that. It's a monetary gain, but because people love evil as much as they're scared of it. I would love to go there one day because I've heard a lot of people have good and bad stories of it, and I want to get my own opinion of it.
I would not feel safe doing anything like that unless I was with somebody like you who was experienced, because you don't know what would follow you home.
Yeah, and Satanism is a very misunderstood thing in many different categories. A lot of those people that call themselves Satanists are just very self-expressive and self-centric in their patterns of what they think life is. It's focus on them. That's what Antoine LaVey's whole message was. There are some people that dabble into the dark stuff, black masses and satanic rituals that are very malignant in the nature of humanity. And I've heard that things have been done at this place, and so it really could cement that there could be something going on. And of course, the person, if they did practice that kind of art, wouldn't want it gone, and it would use it as a sense of amusement park. And I'm not saying anything bad, but this is my outlook on it.
They've just opened it to paranormal investigations on a broader basis. Yeah, you're right.
There's a place here in Connecticut. I'm not in Connecticut, I'm Rhode Island, but there's a place next door in Connecticut that does the same thing. And I'm not going to give them any airtime, but there's a similar place right next door and next state over that does the same thing. And
we have one here too in Detroit. It's called Eloise Asylum.
Yeah, I've heard about Eloise. Both. I knew the guys that used to run that DPX. Todd and I can't think of his other name, but Todd. Yeah, I know. I've heard good things and bad. I've heard people had experiences, but I can understand an asylum, right? I can understand a prison. Like we were talking out of context of outside of this interview, is what could be there could puff its chest and give off that evil personality. But that doesn't necessarily mean they're evil in the sense of the carnate evil, like a demonic. It could just be a prisoner or somebody that had mental issues.
That's right.
That were psychotic or challenged, and that is their way to speak to people or promote action towards people. A lot of those places, unfortunately, are misunderstood to what the communication is or what the actionaries are that happen to people. And there's just some spirits out there that don't want to be talked to. So when you try to speak to them, and I like to call it interrogation, not an interview or investigation. A lot of people turn it into interrogation. If you kept asking me questions and I don't want to answer them, I'm probably not going to be nice either. I'm going to turn into a Karen and tell you get the hell out of here.
Yeah. Yes. No, I can see that. Courtney, you always say that.
I do. I've noticed that spirits will tend to show up or talk more and interact more if you're having a conversation versus 20 questions.
Yeah.
No one wants 20 questions. It is more natural to get to know people if you're having an actual conversation and a really genuine back and forth. But if you're shooting off questions, blah, 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 none of us want that. Then you just feel like, it's an interrogation, like you said.
Yeah, you become antagonist,
Mhm.
to the situation. Yeah,
Well, and who knows how much trauma the spirit sustained when they were here on Earth, and they might be already in a defensive mode. So they're puffing up their chest and like, "Who
yeah,
are you to talk to me?" If they
yeah.
sustained all this trauma, then they might already be defensive, which then to people who are here present physically, they may not have the wherewithal to recognize that.
Yep.
And
Yep.
sometimes they're confused too, Sometimes they're lost souls where they don't actually believe they're dead and that they're still tethered to this world for some reason. If it's trauma or if it's a sudden death, and sometimes when you start dropping that, am I speaking to a spirit or ghost? That confuses them, and sometimes confusion can, as as a behavioral person, is sometimes that confusion can turn into bad behavior because that's just how they react.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anger. Turn into anger.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any travels coming up? Do you have any travel planned? Any more sojourns to other parts of the world or?
Yeah, actually, I have a lot to figure out in the next year, next October, so I have a little over a year. But as of right now, I'm not like the special guest or the tour guide, but I just want to go. It's part of the same organization that I went
Mhm.
with for Transylvania or Romania. But in October of 2025, I keep telling her I'm 99% certain there's that 1%, but I'm supposed to go to Japan for 14 days.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Wow.
So Japan's my top of my bucket list. If the listeners actually could see me, I'm tatted. It's so surprised. I was born in the wrong culture, in the wrong continent. I always say, but I'm littered with Japanese tattoos. I took martial arts most of my life, and I love anime and I love all that kind of culture, and I love Asian food. So it's my bucket list because Japan has a lot of illustrious history. That culture is very interesting. And of course, in the same regard, they have a lot of places that have seen mass trauma, hauntings. I'm supposed to go to, I believe, Nagasaki, which, of course, if we all
Yes.
know where happened there, in Hiroshima, two big bombs went off. So I can only imagine the immense energies I'll feel. We're supposed to go to Ekogahara Forest, Suicide Forest, place that I've always wanted to go and experience for my own inkling of interpretation. So yeah, Japan.
Fabulous. Well,
Japan's supposed to be next. So in 2025, if I go, you'll have to have me back on once I come back from
we
Japan.
certainly will. I will
Oh,
tell
we
you that
will.
although I haven't been there to investigate, I've probably been there at least 20 times, for
I'm,
business.
I'm jealous.
I have a ton of Asian artifacts, art.
Oh,
You'll
wow.
love Japan. It's a beautiful country. I've never seen it the way you're going to see it.
Mhm.
I've gone there for business. So I've been in, Tokyo, as well as other, China, Taiwan, Korea. So that'll be exciting. You'll love it. I mean, it's a really clean, nice country, rich in not just history, but rich in respect. There's just a different way of life there.
Yes, and I'm looking forward to it. So hopefully in 2025 we get to talk about Japan, hear your point of views of it, and
Yeah.
hear my point of view of the hauntings.
Yeah. Well, today we're going to chat about your trip to Romania. It's crazy to think that the whole world is still so enchanted with someone who lived 600 years ago,
Mm,
almost entirely due to the book Dracula by Bram Stoker. It's crazy to think it's just so popular still. It's long been associated with all this horror and darkness, but actually, I think you're going to share this. Romania is beautiful. And people hear the name Transylvania, and of course it conjures up an image of all these, vampires and darkness, but it's also a very culture rich, beautiful country, deep valleys and beautiful mountains, and a legacy of death. If any country is haunted, Romania is. And what you got to do, where you trace the steps of Vlad the Impaler, not many people get to do. So you and a group of others did this, and we're going to explore this trip with you. And or was it a pilgrimage? It's a huge coincidence that both Vlad the Impaler and Bram Stoker share the same birthday. Did you know that, Courtney?
I did not know that.
Yeah. So that is weird. It is.
It's really
And
odd.
we went actually during we were there during his birthday for both of them.
Whoa.
Wow. I got to visit the desk at I think it's like British Museum. It has a library next to it, the British Library or whatever it's called. And they have sectioned off the exact desk where Stoker wrote Dracula. He wrote it there in the library, and you can see where he worked, and it has a lot of his personal effects there. It's kind of cool.
That is pretty cool.
Did Vlad the Impaler, whom Dracula was inspired by, really bite people for their blood? We get to hear about all that today. I'm going to turn it over to Courtney, and Courtney's going to talk to James about his trip.
Hey, James, so how did you get involved with this trip?
Well, it pronounced it was kind of luck in reality. You know, mysterious adventures tours. Maria, who is the owner of that company, her and I are good friends, and I seen that she was promoting this event for Romania, and I sent her an email. And at that point, it was Father Sebastian and Patty Negri as the bills for that event. They would be the tour guides, celebrity tour guides, whatever you want to call it. I sent a message to Maria. I was like, well, you have a vampire, because Father Sebastian is big into the vampire culture here in America. He creates fangs, and they run a lot of those endless night events that you see promoted, like vampire balls. And then Patty Negri, of course, the Good Witch, which has, of course, there's a lot of witch culture, gypsy culture in Romania. And I said, well, being the business person that I am, I said, well, I see one thing missing. I see the trifecta missing. I don't see a cult specialist or demonologist on your poster. And
Nice.
she's like, well, that's actually a really great idea. Let me talk to Father Sebastian and Patty Negri. And I was brought on board. You know how things happen in life. Both Father Sebastian and Patty Negri fell off. So then I became the sole celebrity tour guide for Romania. And it just happened to come to fruition that way, and the deal was sealed. You know, it was an adventure that when you get hits in your stomach, or you get an idea or an inkling of an idea, and you don't pull the trigger on it, you know, usually you miss something that could really come your way and really expand your outlook on life. And I got that pit in my stomach when I saw that poster, and I said, you know, I could hesitate right now and look like I'm just being a bandwagon jumper and say, hey, have me on this too. At the end of the day, I was like, you know, I could look at it like that in a negative, or I could look at it as in a positive. I could be denied, saying thank you for your idea, or I could still go if things came out to be, but it worked in my favor. And, you know, I appreciate Maria very much. She does tours throughout the whole world where it's centric on the culture, but also the supernatural aspect of it as well. And it's catered to both. And it's great because, you know, Romania was one of the places, top 3 probably on my list of visiting for my own needs and my own form of exploration, because like most people here in America, we were raised to read Dracula or heard about it, or even saw the movie with Gary Oldman, or the many other different interpretations of vampires in culture. And then, of course, as well, growing up in Rhode Island, we have a prolific, actually one of the most prolific in the United States, accounts of a vampire as well, in Mercy Brown. So, you know, having all these kind of things in melding pot, it was always somewhere I wanted to go and explore.
Well, and if you don't try, you never know. So it's pretty amazing that you were like, hey, you know what? I'm just going to reach out. And if they say no, they say no. But the worst they're going to do is say no. And then you could attempt to figure out, okay, how can I get on this trip? So at least you gave it a shot, and look what happened. You had this amazing experience.
I did. And I can't believe it's been 2 years now, to be honest with you. You know, I regularly think about it, because it was, as Tish said, it was a pilgrimage in a form of fashion. You know, my life did change immensely from that trip, in a good and a bad way. But it was a trip that I believe I needed to find myself in a form of self-reflection, and the things that I've done mistakenly in my life. but also answers to a lot of my questions about Transylvania, Vlad Tepes, of course, the vampire legends, and a lot of the other historical places that have been deemed or thought of as haunted in Romania. And I'm very thankful that I actually did pull that trigger, and it worked out in my favor.
Hmm. Have you often felt a pull towards vampire and that type of?
Well, yeah, because demonology is very centric in that viewpoint. King James, when he wrote Demonology, was really kind of like a testament of a witch hunting handbook, and so wasn't Malefice Maleficarium, because back then was the kind of bled into the European Inquisition, which not just hunted witches, but also hunted werewolves and hunted vampires as well, or people thought to be those things. And so it kind of uh, really delves into demonology, because quintessentially vampires are devils, right? Are creatures of course, in the Slavic traditions, which had an influence on Romania, which is it really has a lot to do with demonic folklore, and so that alone piqued my interest about vampires. And grew up with a lot of good movies, not just Dracula with Gary Oldman, but Interview with the Vampire, Queen of the Damned, and the list can go on and on about movies that enthralled me about the ideas of vampire, and of course the local legends as well. So it really does bleed through to what I do, and of course it gave me a clearer understanding of what I do when I went to Romania, and understanding that culture and the Slavic traditions that were influenced in Romania when it comes to things like the Strigoi, which is their vampire.
Every single time we talk, it would be so easy to ask you other questions to expand on different pieces of this. And I'm like, no, Courtney, focus on the trip. So what were your goals of this trip?
Well, it was, of course, self exploration. I wanted to see, one thing that I've always said, and I haven't really succeeded on this because I've only been out of the country twice in my time. I've always wanted to be a citizen of the world, right? Academia is great, and I think that when you read about other cultures and read about their history, their wars, and their religions, that's great. You learn something, but when you can apply it, when you can go there and you can involve yourself with that culture, learn their traditions, learn their belief systems, full fledged physically, then you take that academia, that knowledge through reading a book, and then you learn it physically as well, and you can meld the two. And I think that really expands your outlook on life and people and humanity, knowing that America is not the center pole of the world. There are many different thoughts and opinions throughout the whole world. So really, it was that I wanted to learn that culture. I wanted to learn their myths and folklores, and see how it really transitioned from 600 years ago, or even to over 100 years ago when Bram Stoker wrote Dracula. I believe it was actually 1897. I could be wrong on that. I wanted to really solidify those details of what I've learned through material, reading material, and physically learn it and be involved in it.
Well, it can enrich your life, and it really can change and widen your perspective.
And it sure did, for sure. Not just the trip in itself and being a part of Romania and the culture and eating their food, waking up there every day. But like I said, it had personal impact on me too. It made me realize life is short. This is a destination. And, it really did a lot for me as a person. And, I'm here with you guys today as a much different person than I was 2 years ago. And, I have that trip, I have a lot to thank for it. That's why I like to call it a pilgrimage, because it really turned into something like that, where I found myself and found my self being of what I was doing wrong and what I need to do right. So it became a smorgasbord of different things, a part of that trip.
Were there any surprises?
Um, I say my largest surprise would be that Dracula's castle, which is Brown Castle, actually really isn't haunted, and
Huh.
that Vlad the Impaler actually only maybe visited there one time in historical record. So he
Wow.
really wasn't ever there. So that was my biggest surprise because, you always get Brom Castle, aka Dracula's Castle, is this prolific destination that's haunted. And, Vlad the Impaler was there all the time. But, in historical context, he wasn't. And, a lot of people that have gone there, investigated there, have gotten nothing. And even Maria, who's been there before, a year previously, they did investigate it, and it was dead for them as well. And so our mission was, as many people as wanted to investigate it, we didn't, because we took her word for it. But we also had a tour guide that part of Romania and Thrills, who is actually Romanian, and a very great guy. His name was Vlad as well, funny enough. And he actually says he has a lineage to Vlad Tepes. But yeah, he basically said the exact same thing, and he's Romanian. So, you kind of have to take it from the mouth of the bird when you're there in that culture. So, but yeah, that was probably my biggest shock.
Dang, that is a surprise. Wow. What investigations did you do when you were there?
So we had a few great investigations. For one, we got to check out Hoya Baca Forest, which is predominantly known as the second suicide forest in the world beside Ekogihara, or even known as ecological anomaly, because there's the center of that forest, there's actually that nothing grows. And they've done geological testing to see why nothing grows in that circumference. Really nothing that really points to any kind of data to why there's nothing grows in that area. And that was interesting because it is a spooky forest. You have no cell phone service. It's dark. It's foggy. The trees are all grown dysfunctionally. Like they're all wavy. They're very interesting trees that have no life to them, really. So that was an interesting place. Other place that we investigated was Corvin Castle, which is famously known actually for having Vlad the Impaler beside Perori Fortress, where his fortress was. But Vlad Tepes was actually imprisoned there for over 7 years at Corvin Castle. And of course, the Turkish army was invading them. He was there. And it was also very well known for where The Nun was filmed as well. And we got to investigate there, which was pretty cool because there have been experiences there from people in the past. There has been killing, beheading on the property, probably way more than that. But one that's very well known and spoken about there was a beheading. So that was pretty cool. And it's a vast castle. The coolest thing about it, too, was that our hotel, which was basically brand new. They built a hotel on this little hill that overlooked Corvin Castle. So anytime you woke up, you can go out to the balcony and see Corvin Castle. And there's a picture of me on Facebook on that balcony with Corvin Castle behind me. But that was cool. But I would say the coolest spot that I got to investigate didn't really bring much activity besides some experiences that we had personally, but I think we were the first American team to investigate Vlad the Impaler's birth home. And that was cool because, we to be one of the first American groups, or the first American group to investigate that location, was kind of really invigorating, because it was like I did something a lot of people haven't done.
That's
And
so neat that you got to have that experience.
yeah, so I would say that was probably my most fascinating because of the spot, the historical context of it. I would say Corvin Castle probably brought more data than, of course, that location. But of course, Hoya Baca Forest had some data as well that was very appealing, such as EMF hits in the middle of the forest and stuff like that with no cell phone signal, which could be debated, of course, but still very interesting.
Exactly.
But that was, I think, the three spots that we got to investigate that probably was the most fruitful. And of course we got to check out many other different places where we necessarily didn't get to investigate we had like many investigations, like we pulled away from like large crowds if there were any, and then maybe did little burst sessions here or there. But we got to go to some monasteries which were built by Vlad the Impaler. Two of them that have state, that they actually have the body of Vlad the Impaler because he was beheaded. So his head went to Turkey, but
his head was in one place and his body somewhere else.
yeah. So there's two monasteries that claim that his body is buried there, and they have, of course, shrines with him being presented there that this is the spot. But one of the monasteries, he actually had more involvement with the building of it than the other one. He commissioned it. Both of them, I do believe, but the one that I do believe that if there was a certainty that he was there, it would be that one monastery. And I can't think off the name because a lot of these names are very complicated, and it's been 2 years. So I could look it up on my phone through pictures, but I'd probably waste the whole interview looking for that photo. But yeah, those were interesting. Every piece of it was great. I got to investigate myself and got to investigate the culture, and then I also got to investigate the paranormal.
Very cool. What was your most memorable experience there?
Like I said, I would have to say probably Vlad the Impaler's birth home, but there was I don't know if I'll get in trouble for it saying it. It wasn't on Maria. It was my idea, and people caved in. We live in a democracy. We take a vote. It happens. So there was this location, and I can't think of the name, but this is actually probably where we had the most evidential proof that there was something there. And we stayed at this very fancy hotel. It was beautiful, and there was a house on the hill that's been abandoned for so long. And the story is there was supposedly a very famous musician that owned it, and he had a helper, a young boy, who he mistreated, and I believe the boy killed himself. I could be nixing that whole story, but I'm pretty sure that those are the fine details. And basically why it has stayed abandoned is because it's haunted and nobody's bought it, and you can easily get into the property. It's not like you're breaking and entering. Nobody lives there. Somebody probably does own that property itself, but I think actually it belongs to probably to that town because it's been abandoned for so long. But so we investigated that spot, and we had knocks, we had bangs, we had people being affected emotionally, physically.
Wow.
That was pretty cool because it was like we actually got to go into a place that isn't widely known. It's only a little thing that's known by the town, this location, its own local myth and folklore. So that was pretty cool because we got to take a step outside of the touristy form of what we were doing, and we got to do something different and a little far-fetched. So
those local hidden gems.
It was a local hidden gem, and it was a beautiful house, don't get me wrong. That alone made that trip so worthwhile because we got to find that hidden gem, and we got to be involved. Of course, I was scared of it the whole time, even though I kept being told that you're not going to get, nothing's going to happen. But, I'm not a person to go into places that you're not supposed to go into. But I thought, well, in Romania, you live once.
I mean,
and I had to check it out. So, and we all voted on. Nobody was hesitant at all. And if people were uncomfortable, then of course, then we likely would have not done it. But because of our tour guide saying it would be all right, and of course, everybody in the group being all right with it and participating, we took inclement groups. So some people went because it's been abandoned for 20 years. So there probably were structural integrity issues in different forms of it, and we've noticed some of it with the ceiling and stuff. But
the nice thing is you do have some background in construction, so
yes, nobody died and nobody got left at the house dead. So no spirits have been intertwined into that property. We all came out unscathed.
What were a couple of the experiences you had there?
Well, like I said, the knocks and the bangs,
Yep.
you could say, of course, it was the structure, weight, and stuff like that, but a lot of those knocks and bangs were on command. Like we asked, "Can you make a noise for us?" And then we heard that. So it wasn't frequent in the sense like when somebody stepped, the wood would warp and then knock, which would happen with wood, especially in an old house, which it was. But it was on command, so that we had EMF hits, and of course,
Mm-hmm.
being the celebrity tour guide and being a predominant paranormal investigator and understanding the rules of and regulations of an actual investigation, I have to believe that everybody had their phone on airplane mode or powered off, and I have to take that with a grain of salt, of course, because some people lie, but we were getting EMF hits, and the house was dead and no electricity to it. So, we were getting that, and then,
Wow.
like I said, people were being affected emotionally, or I believe one person got pushed slightly.
Whoa.
So these are little things that were happening
Yep.
in that investigation, which to me, out of everything, was the most worthwhile because that's what the most things that we got. Little things here or there happened at those other spots, but this was the one that kind of gave fruitful data, and many people got to experience it in increments, and each group had their own experience. So it wasn't like 20 of us was in one room or one part of that house. We had like 5 or 6 people or 7 people with us, and then they would rotate out, and then another 5 or 7 would come in, and you know, we each group had an experience.
Well, and that's smart because it's really hard to do in an investigation when you have 20 people. I've done it and it's often too many people and it gets chaotic. And I've noticed, I'm sure some spirits are okay with it, but I've noticed that spirits don't tend to like having 20 people
Yeah.
all up in their business.
I'd say in a spot where, and when I do a lot of investigation events and there's droves of people, and I always say it's not really a paranormal investigation. We can equate it to be very similar because there's going to be a lot of contamination. But a few spots that I've seen really warranted a bunch of people, or like event centers or theaters, where you kind of fill the spots of it being like a mass collection of people, which would kind of make something occur. But usually in small, intimate locations or places that didn't have mass amount of people, yes,
Yes.
it would definitely ward off things, in my opinion. But a lot of these places aren't very large, so yeah, I agree with that.
And in someone's home. I
Very
mean, it's
true.
their own private home.
Yeah, there would
So,
probably be a handful of people at a time, maybe in this house. If there were parties, maybe much more people. But not everybody has parties at their house every day of the week. Well, unless you live in California and you're rich and you throw house parties. But but
right?
but yeah, usually most people don't tend to have a bunch of people in their house.
No. Hey, so will you walk us through your itinerary? Like how many days were you there? Where did you fly into?
Oh gosh, yeah. I believe
Yeah,
I
I
was
think
there.
our listeners want to know because as they plan these, were you there for 2 weeks? Where do you
Yeah.
fly into? How'd you arrange it all?
So I flew into Bucharest, which is known as Little Paris, for many different reasons. It has a lot of structural similarities. It had, there's intertwined a culture there. But yeah, no, we flew into Bucharest. I flew out of Boston to Bucharest, and well, I stopped in Istanbul first, or what I like to still call Constantinople. We were in Bucharest the most out of it all. I think we were there for 4 days in total, and we got to explore, have certain different foods there, and a little bit more touristy towards the food than other places where we had more authentic food. But it was a beautiful city, no trash, very nice people. We went to clubs and stuff like that to intertwine with the people. We did a bar crawl, dressed up as vampires in
How fun is
Bucharest.
that?
which we were getting a lot of attention for, and people loved it, and very kind to us, and we had a great time there. But yeah, so I'm trying to look up the itinerary right now for you, see if I can find it.
How
But
many days was this trip?
I believe if I remember correctly, I was there for 10 days,
Oh,
which
that's
goes,
nice.
yes, almost 2 weeks. So, enough to kind of brought in and understood, but not enough time to fully kind of take it in. But if I remember correctly, and this is a current itinerary, they do a trip there every year. So I believe, if I remember, and one of the castles that I'm going to name was one of my favorite. It's actually looked more like a palace. They call it a castle, but it's really more of a palace, and was probably one of the coolest spots that I actually went to while I was there for a historical aspect of it, because the woodwork, and this place is worth millions and millions of dollars. It was probably one of the most beautiful homes I've ever been in, or locations, because it's not a home, it's palace. But we went to Bucharest, then we went to Old Town in Bucharest, where, well, one of the largest cemeteries in Romania, or the largest cemetery in Romania is there in Bucharest, which was pretty cool, because the way they bury people there are much different than we bury people here in America. They have these tombs and work pieces of art that are usually stationed at one of these people's spots of
Mm.
eternal life.
Oh,
Well,
that's the Baloo Cemetery.
it is correct. Yes, it is. We've been there. We went to Snagoff, Kambina, and Sinai. Sinai, I believe, if I remember correctly, is the story that I told you about the house. We went to two castles. This is like day 4 now.
Mm-hmm.
Bron Castle, which is, of course, Dracula's castle, and then Pelesh Castle, which is the palace, I like to call it as, because it doesn't look like your traditional castle. It looks like more of a palace that you would imagine through like a Disney film. Then we went to Prejmer, and then Brasov. Actually, was it Sinai or Brasov? It might be Brasov that had that house, but it was either Sinai or Brasov. And then we did a medieval fortress, which is still one of the put together fortresses, that, because the Roman Empire was there. This was a Roman Empire fortress, and they're still doing excavations where they're finding old column lines and stuff like that. And then we went to Hoyabaka Forest, went to Alabaulu. We went to Jalava Prison, which was pretty cool. It's Jalava Prison, I do believe, if I'm remembering correctly, is an active prison to this day. And it was actually one of the scariest things, because this is an active prison that houses a lot of their most devious criminals. You can't bring your phones in there. You can't do any photography unless you have a camera and you get permission, the actual camera. So we did have one photographer there, C.L. Thomas, who is an author. She took pictures of certain spots. Of course, took a picture behind one of the prison bars. It was a pretty cool photo. But Jalava Prison was interesting because this is when the Soviet Empire was still around, the Soviet Union. When there was a mass prejudice against religion and other people that didn't believe in the Soviet Union and their ideologies and the methodologies, they would actually put people in this prison. And there's an old part of the prison that goes back to World War One, and that's how old this prison is, where you actually can visit. And we visited that spot. It was pretty cool. It was eerie, knowing that some of the famous detractors of the Soviet Union in Romania and outside of Romania actually were imprisoned in in Jalava prison. Other things I wasn't too fond of,
Mm.
in my opinion, but we got to see a ritual by witches at this witches pond. It wasn't my favorite thing, because it's not that I don't like witches or paganism. Thought it was a little bit too much, in my opinion, but take it and do it yourself and see how you like it. And it's still pretty interesting that 3 Romanian witches do this ritual in front of you at this pond. We got to explore Nuandora and Sabayu. We didn't get to go to Panari Fortress. That was on the docket, but what had happened is they were doing repairs on the bridge because there's a long trailway. It is said that to get to Panari Fortress, which was which actually Vlad Tepes' fortress is that it so many steps, but there's also like a big land bridge that actually gets into the fortress, and they were working on that at that time. So unfortunately, I didn't get to check it out. And that's where they actually on Ghost Adventures had some supposedly prolific evidence and all that mumbo jumbo. But and then we went back to Bucharest after all those locations and got to spend another night in Bucharest before we flew out. And I think it was 10 days or 12 days. It was either 10 or 12 days. And this itinerary right now on Mysterious Adventures Tours is 12 days. So I'm probably lean towards 12 days. All those things that I said are places that we got to go to. Like I said, a lot of it isn't supernatural related. A lot of it is also being in Transylvania, feeling places that Vlad the Impaler maybe had trekked through. In a bunch of ways, it's still very interesting because a lot of these towns and cities have a lot of lore to them, and a lot of places that really injected into history, like the Black Church. That was a very fascinating location. It's a cathedral, and it's black because there was a fire, and now the exterior of it is all black, which makes it look menacing and cool. But you get to check a lot of these places out. Sinai and Brasov were very beautiful locations, like breathtaking. I believe Sinai, you're on a mountain, and you get to see like this depression of houses from a hill going down, and it just looks magical. It looks like you're basically in a Disney movie or in kind of an imaginary tale, and you get to see this widespread of houses and like basically this tunnel between mountains, and it's pretty cool.
Well, it sounds like you were able to immerse yourself in history and the beautiful scenery, and also enjoy or experience some pretty amazing paranormal adventures.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, it was magical. I barely forget. I barely remember what I did last week, but a lot of what I remember and took in from Romania will always be with me to this day. I might forget names of towns or locations, but I know what I was involved in. I know what I experienced. I know what I felt looking at the scenery, the cities, the old forms of culture. This is Romanian is the only Romance language still utilized into regards of how it's presented. It also has a lot of Slavic traditions incorporated into it. There's a lot of people still in Romania that believe in the Strigoi, which is, the early concept of our vampire. So a lot of people still believe that these things are still in the forest line that are going to jump out and steal your soul and eat you and turn you into one. Hoyabaka Forest is a location where they believe the Strigoi roam. So you have a lot of this mystique, and then you have the gypsy culture, which are in that area of the land are very dangerous. They have their own rituals and rites and things that they do, and some of them do practice magic and stuff like that. So you have that mystical nature of it as well, and but between it all, the paranormal, the history, the mystical aspects of it make it fascinating. And Romania is beautiful, and you're really in the centerfold of many different cultures. Turkey's right below you. You have Hungary to the left of you. North of you, you have Ukraine and a portion of Russia. So you have all these cultures and different kind of thoughts interceding into this centerfold of a land, and you have all these different traditions that know them Romania, and you get to experience that.
Yeah. For people listening who want to take a haunted trip, what's your advice?
Do it. Do it. You only live once. You never know when your last breath's going to be. Not to sound morbid, but it's the truth.
That's true.
If there's a place you wanted to go to understand the culture, if you're a paranormal investigator and you wanted to delve deep into the unknown of a different location, a different continent or a country, then do so, because it only expounds upon yourself to better utilize who you are as a person in the field or as a person, because as much as we are in America are a great nation, and I will wholeheartedly say that, we are only a small piece of this world, and there's so much more to learn from other people's perspectives and how they live, how they do things, how they investigate. So definitely do it. Jump on an adventure, if it's Mysterious Adventure Tours or another conglomerate that does it, like you were saying, Amy Bruni's Strange Escapes, or there are other people that do adventures to Romania. I believe Charles Rosnay, who's running Connecticut Paracon this weekend, does a Transylvania tour every year as well. So there are a bunch of people that do these kind of tours, but find the right person to go on the tour with. I recommend Maria because she's a close friend, and I went on a tour with her, and it was nothing but fun. Definitely, if don't hesitate. If it's a monetary thing, I kind of understand that these adventures can be expensive. As much as I like to say, because I was a celebrity guest investigator and tour guide, that it was free for me. It wasn't. I got, of course, a very good rate, discounted rate. If it's a monetary thing, there are loans, there are payment plans, a firm. There are ways that you don't have to put yourself in a financial burden by going on these adventures where you have minimal payments, and not to harp on Maria in a good way, but she offers a payment plan too, up to, I believe it's up to 18 months.
Fantastic.
So, if it's a monetary thing, because, of course, with inflation and things are high nowadays, that shouldn't be an issue when you can pay it off in 18 months, put some money aside. The big thing I will say, and the big advice I'd have to give, let's say a tour is $6,000. You do have to pay your way there. So you have to fly there to that destination. That's out of your pocket outside of the tour fees.
Okay.
So that's the only thing. But a lot of, like Japan, Maria will give you sound advice, or other people, you go to travel agency for sound advice. But, like Japan, instead of going from Boston to Japan, which would be $1,600, I was told to fly from Boston to LAX to Narita, and it would be only $600. And
Nice.
so you have to learn these little tips to save yourself money. But like places like Romania, right? If you can pay that trip, save money, and then go to Romania, our dollar is 5 to 1 there. So I believe it's 5 to 1 there. So every dollar you have is 5 of their dollars, and it has gotten a little bit more expensive there over the years, from what I've been told. But still, you can go over there with a couple $100 or $1,000, and you can live quite lavishly with food wise, and in the hotel, and the hotels are all covered, and all the places are covered, but like your food and stuff like that, and like if you want to go have a drink or go to a club, of course that's none of it's included, but some of these places that you go to, your money holds weight, and you can have a good time. So definitely don't doubt that you can do it, because once you have doubt in your mind, then you're not going to do it. So if you really want to go somewhere, then pull that trigger, and do it, and take a tour, and go becoming broiled into that culture, and feel what it feels like to be a Romanian for 12 days or 14 days or however long you want to go. But I say do it, and if people want to contact me after this through my website or Facebook to get in touch with Maria, or check out her website to see what tour she has coming up. Like she goes to Greece, Egypt, and all those places as well. Do it.
Good advice. We'll make
Thank
sure we
you.
have all those links in our podcast summary.
We will.
It's funny, you mentioned Egypt. I did a trip to Egypt for a month. And although we weren't doing investigations, I now know, looking back, there was a lot of energy there. There was a lot going on. We were all over the country. That would probably be on my bucket list to go back to now that I know so much more about it. But
Yeah, Egypt's probably my number two. Japan's number one, Egypt's number two, Romania was number three, number four would have to be China, number five would have to be Greece. So like Egypt is definitely on my bucket list. I'm not getting any younger, but I have Japan hopefully planned. Like I said, in my mind I'm going, but I have two kids and I have a significant
Yeah.
other, and I have to figure that out. I can't leave them stranded for 2 weeks. That's
Right.
a 14-day trip.
Yeah.
And but yeah, no, definitely. Egypt is definitely on that. I have a friend that is readily there. Makes me jealous in a good way. I feel good that good for him that he's always there and he's a part of uncovering mysteries. But man, I would love to check out the pyramids of Giza and just come involved with that country
Same.
and the history. Egyptian history is formidable into how history has advanced and has also biblical connections as well, which would make it fascinating for me to check out and in that realm of things of the theological sense.
Well, just don't go in July and August, because when I was there, the temperatures were 130 degrees.
Yeah.
That sounds miserable.
Oh, by the way, James, if you want to know what it feels like to be in hell, go to Egypt in August or July.
Well, you know what? One thing I hear about Egypt, and this is maybe speculation, but beside the heat, I also hear in certain parts can be dangerous as well. But that can be anywhere. But I definitely hear that, especially how Egypt's government has kind of fallen apart. I heard it's a little bit very
even in Cairo. In Cairo, a woman cannot walk the street by herself. And if you are a tourist group of more than 4 or 6 people, and you're from a list of countries like the US, for every 4 to 6 tourist groups, for every tourist group that has 4 to 6 people, you have to have armed guards with you 24/7. So they are in suits with Uzis under their jackets. I'm not kidding. I did it. In many cases, when the tourists come into town, the smaller towns along the Nile, it's required that everyone in the town go into their houses, and only the visitors can be out. It's interesting, and the history is deep, and you feel it as soon as you land. So that'd be a good one. Anything else, Courtney? I know we've taken up a lot of time. We're getting more and more requests for destinations and what it's like. So this is very timely. So thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, James.
No, thank you guys for having me on. I greatly appreciate it. It brings me down memory lane every time I talk about Romania. Makes me wish that I could have just stayed there, but that of course would not be possible. If I was in a different situation and I didn't have two amazing little children, I probably would have never left, to be honest with you. I've seen enough mini split units over in Romania that I knew that I could sustain my livelihood there. So,
by the way, you see that in Egypt. I'm not kidding. What I'm going to tell you may sound like an exaggeration, but it's not. You can ask your friend. As you go along the Nile, there are cities and villages along the Nile, and these adobes have no windows, but they have air conditioners. They have no windows. So you're blowing AC into something that has no windows, and all you see are these huts and houses with no windows, and you can see the TV glowing inside and the air conditioner going.
A fun fact about Egypt that correlates with, of course, HVAC is Egypt was the birthplace that, as we know, was the birthplace of the idea of AC, right? So why I say that is because when Carrier and all these other places were creating the technology for it, or understanding how cold air could be introduced into an environment, so Egyptians used to put wet reeds on their window, and so when the air, because in Egypt, as you know, probably would know yourself, Tish, is it gets cold, and
Yeah.
so. But what happened is if there was air draft and it hits the cold reeds, it actually would bring cold air into the location, the home. So a lot of the interpretation of how,
Really?
yeah, AC was created was
That's like a
from
swamp cooler, isn't it? Kind of.
kind of, yeah, like they put wet reeds in the windows and then the air would hit it and then they would get cold air from it.
Well, James, that is fascinating how all this is 6 degrees of separation. Thank you for your time
Sure is.
today. And don't forget, you can contact James at www.jamesannitto.com. He's also on Facebook. We will put the links in the podcast summary. So if you all pull the podcast up, you can click through and go from there. As always, James, it's been great. It's been an experience, and we learn so much every time we have you on.
Every time. You are so interesting and fascinating, and I enjoy learning from you.
That was a great compliment. I appreciate it. I don't hear those a lot. And ladies, thank you for having me on.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.